The body and mind and soul are perfectly wired. So if you think about getting chills, if you think about your heart racing, if you think about that gut feeling, if you think about the hair standing up on your back, like our bodies are literally transmitting. It's not a dead meat suit.
Welcome back to season 2 of the How We Can Heal podcast. I so enjoyed sharing season 1 with you, and we have some incredible guests coming on for season 2. I created this podcast because the hard times seem to just keep on coming these days. These guests and I have committed our lives to healing work and to fostering health and joy in the world, even as we work through the impacts of trauma and face deep challenges. So let's dive in and let's all keep talking about how we can heal. Today, our guest is Jennifer Joy Jiménez. Jennifer is the founder of the Health and Wellbeing Division at Brave Thinking Institute, as well as a highly sought-after speaker, consultant, trainer, and coach. Through her transformational retreats, workshops, and cutting-edge Vibrant Healthy Woman program, Jennifer has coached thousands worldwide to become more confident, healthy, joyful, abundant, and full of life, so that they feel fully empowered to make the difference they're here to make in the world. Jennifer has been featured in publications like Shape, Self, Oxygen, and Woman's World, and on TV on NBC News, Fox Business, and more. In addition, she has shared the stage with thought leaders like Marianne Williamson, Maya Angelou, Byron Katie, Bob Proctor, Wayne Dyer, Deepak Chopra, and others. She's also the creator of the highly acclaimed transformative movement modality Transcendance, which we'll talk about today, helping people of all ages and backgrounds worldwide move stuck energy, dance their dreams into reality, and truly thrive with joy and vitality. Jennifer and I connected in a group of female entrepreneurs committed to thriving in business and life, and I was immediately attracted to her positive energy and generous spirit. She's full of embodied wisdom and cares deeply for those around her, so it is my joy to share her with you today. Let's welcome Jennifer to the show. Jennifer, welcome on the How We Can Heal podcast. I'm so happy to have you here.
It is my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yes, I am super excited to talk about all things dance and movement and joy and play and all of the energy I feel like you bring and to share it with listeners here. So, I'd love to just start with, I know you have a history of professional dance, right? You've moved and danced your whole life. But I'm wondering when it started to feel like it could be a healing modality or an opening or something that's more soul expressive for you. Was there a moment? Was there a time in your life? What was that like?
Absolutely, yes. I would say my favorite moment, which was also one of my darkest moments, and my lightest moments, both. If you are somebody that your greatest moment was also your darkest moment. So when I was in my mid-20s, I was dancing professionally as a modern dancer. And my husband and I got married very young, and I got pregnant in my mid-20s, which was kind of young for, a dancer. But I really was thrilled. I knew I wanted to be a mom. And so I really embraced pregnancy and birth with like just full gusto. I wanted to be super healthy. I'm a health nut. And I really wanted to have the best pregnancy I could have. And I was influenced in this world of nature and what if my body just knows how to do this, and I'd really love to have a natural birth. So I read every book I could find. My mother has a spiritual center, and we had doulas and midwives. Like, I walked out of church with like 3 bags of books that got handed to me, like, here, read these. So I approached it very much from everything I could find in the world of science, as well as everything I could find in the world of metaphysics. So I had my ocean wave visualization. I visualized my perfect birth every night, like religiously for probably 8 months, because it took about a month to get there, right? And I did prenatal yoga, and I did, at the time, it was Bradley. The Bradley method was like the big thing back then. My daughter's 22, just to put things into perspective. So 20 years ago. Anyhow, long story short, you might know where this is headed, but I did not have the beautiful, experience that I had visualized every night to ocean waves. It was quite traumatic. the least, it was 50 hours.
Oh,
And
oh,
it was 50 hours. 48 of them were natural, and towards the end, I had the sweetest doctor who, like, knew. She was like, "I know you told me not to say anything. I'm not gonna say anything, but we're like, there is a limit. Like, your body will, like, poop out here, and the baby's starting to show a little bit of signs of distress, so we're coming to the end of, like, something's gonna have to give pretty soon, and it'll either be your body and then it'll be like a C-section, which would be like the last resort, and I know what you don't want. And so, your body just might need a little bit of help just to kind of fully dilate, because I just wasn't dilating. We realized after she came out, my daughter was turned upside down, so she was sunny side up. So it was all that back labor that I didn't realize I was having. Anyways, it was what God gave me to help me recognize that there was some missing pieces in the mind-body connection. And so I had an epidural, which I just felt like was such a failure, at that point in my life. I feel differently now. I think there's many right paths to birth. Don't feel the same way, but I was very attached and very resistant and very judgmental about it all back then. And anyways, but I had this, like, incredible daughter. I did push her out, so we didn't have a C-section. I had this amazing daughter in my hands, but this big, huge question mark in my mind, like, "What the hell just happened? Why?" Because I felt like I did it all right. I mean, I'm in the best shape of my life. I ate everything to a T. I did everything my metaphysical books and spiritual coaches and the mind body people said to do, and it didn't work. So, am I broken, or is it? And, like, I remember going to lunch with, like, these other moms. And this one woman, people say things and they just don't know what they're saying. She was like, "Well, you just have to trust your body and, like, it'll just do it." Like, I had like a 4-hour labor and it was like fine. It was all natural. And I'm not a violent person.
yes. I so appreciate what you're saying though, because there's so much depth in what you're saying, because we can think there's something wrong with us when something happens in a way that we don't want, or in a way that other people see as, well, that's not what happened to me. My experience was super easy. And there's privilege in that, right? Like if you have the body that pushed out a baby in 4 hours, like great, wonderful, and that's not everyone's experience. Same thing with, like, I feel like my biggest privilege is having parents that were, like, so loving and kind and supportive, and I know a lot of people have that, but a lot of people really don't, right? And so, there's these things that we have. Oh, if I were like, "Oh, your relationship with your mom's complicated?" Well, mine's great. Like, can you imagine, especially as a therapist, if I walked around thinking that? Like, it's just not, we have things that go well. Sometimes we are intending it, sometimes it just happens sort of magically seeming. And then we have things that we put every effort in, or we're really invested, and they just don't go the way that we visualized. And I think that's a really hard, and I was asking Gabby about this a little bit too. I think it's a really hard thing with spiritual messaging in particular to work through, because we have that thought, I did everything right. Like I visualized and I let go and I intended and I prayed and I nourished myself. And so there's that hiccup of, well, is it me? Like, what did I do? So what did you do with that?
That's a great question. Yeah, it actually threw me into a bit of a downward spiral for a bit. I had a really pretty bad case of the baby blues. And, it took me a bit, but I just went within ultimately, because I had gone without, meaning looking for all the solutions outwardly, and I felt like I had done it all. And so therefore, okay, God, I'm just gonna go within and I'm just gonna ask for guidance. And I surrendered. And that's really, I think, the first key. And I'm going to quote my mom. It's one of my favorite quotes. And she says that the content of our life is the curriculum of our evolution. And I know you believe this. I believe that we're a spiritual being having a human experience. Therefore, every experience, the challenging relationship with our mother, the 50-hour birth, the food addiction, or the trauma, the worst thing that happens, And it's not, it's one of the most challenging things I think about our human side, to come to terms with that is my spiritual path that came into my life to be a teacher, to be a transformational agent, to help me become all that I'm meant to be. And to this day, I'm extremely grateful for that traumatic 50-hour labor, because it literally catapulted me into the work that I do today. I got very curious about the mind body connection, because I felt like in the birth, there was so much resistance and fear in my body that I didn't know was there. And I felt like all of the training I had done was all intellectual training. Even the yoga was an outside in, like, do this pose, do that pose. At least the teachers that, I didn't have somebody like you, right, to help me invoke body wisdom inside of yoga. It was a do this pose, and your body's just going to open, versus in birth, your body's going to be telling you what it needs. You want to let your body be your guide. I didn't have a yoga teacher telling me to do the poses, and I hadn't learned yet how to trust my own body wisdom. I'd say that was the biggest thing, that was the resistance, was I had learned how to control the body, how to resist my body's urges, how to ignore my hunger. Prior to getting pregnant, I was in starvation mode pretty much as a dancer all the time, to overwork. So to override my natural tendencies to rest, rejuvenate, and recover, all the disempowering, really abusive behaviors, we can have judgmental, extreme judgment around my body size and shape, all of that. So the birth was this like wake up call and doorway. So I just started to devour everything I could on the mind body connection, on energy healing, on energy medicine. And I ultimately, through that curiosity and desire, was led to conscious dance, beautiful leaders in this field. And I began to study with them and take classes. And this was back in the DVD days where there were DVDs. So I ordered DVDs and, just began to like just drink and eat everything that I could find. And I also began to just creatively express. I also started to sing. I at the time I held quite a bit of fear in my voice. And during birth, in some of these methods, you're not allowed to like make noise, which couldn't be more opposite to how I ultimately learned how to birth naturally. Like, well, hello, like your throat chakra and your root chakra are so connected that like if you're constricted here, you're going to be constricted in your pelvis and in your, birth canal. So anyhow, the good news is over those 4 years of really diving deep, and I also healed the birth trauma through conscious dance. Like I'll remember as if it was yesterday being on the dance floor and just like actually reliving some of the birth trauma and just sobbing it and just feeling as if it was literally like draining out of my body into the earth. It was amazing. And I was like, "Oh my gosh, if this is my experience, wow, what if I could help others?" And that during that time was when I just started to people would come and ask me like, I can tell something's going on. What are you doing? Like, I want to learn. And it started to just birth through me taking these two worlds, the science, the metaphysics, and the mind body, and just began to merge them together into my own modality that I now call transcendence. And I've continued to study all these years, 22 years, to first and foremost have it serve my own spiritual journey and journey with my body through all these phases of life. Now, as a 47-year-old woman, it's a lot of different phases, 3 different babies. I would love to announce that I did have that all natural birth. My son came in 2 hours, 4 years later after my daughter. And third baby came in 90 minutes. Now I wasn't going for fast, by the way, at all. I was just going for flow. I was just going for, you know what? I'm prepared for 60 hours if it has to be. Like I thought that was my like that's why it took 4 years to have another baby. So I was like, "Oh man. Okay, like I if this is what it's going to take, like I'm willing. It's worth it." I don't know how many times it's worth it, but maybe twice. And by the third baby, I was like, oh, I think I've tapped into a place of absolute surrender of my body wisdom, able to now translate that to everything I do. That's the beauty. So even if you're never going to have a baby, because there's lots of people who that's not their path or they haven't yet, or this isn't a story about birth as much as that was just an opportunity to really discover and learn how to trust and how to really listen and how to tap into this deeper knowing. But that sense of, I like to call it being in the zone, tapped into for a professional speaker, for parenting, for entrepreneurship, in love making, in relation, like it's across the board. Like this body I'm walking around in that is a receiving and transmitting station for life is everything. So if I'm controlling it, restricting it, like suppressing its natural wisdom, that's negatively impacting everything. And if I learn to connect to it, trust it, unleash the natural wisdom within, it's positively impacting everything.
There's so much in what you said. I'm so used to being in like Zoom meetings with you. I want to click the little fire emoji. I want to put the little fire emoji on screen. I'm like, yes, 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 Jennifer. There's so much you said. And even back when you said, the going within after, like you're doing all the, I'm reading all the books, which yes, I mean, I read all the books too. We read all the books. We are interested in the ideas, but then we're also interested in our own body. And then we also have a moment. And I was even sort of reflecting on this in the recent call that we were in together of like, I think I've just got to, I've been digesting a lot of stuff. And I think I just got to like really let all of that dust settle and just listen, like just listen to myself and just come from a really centered place, not a place of like picking fruit and gathering it together, but like letting it blossom from me. And the other thing you said that is really powerful, and I know this is common in spiritual practices about it be our life being the classroom. I've definitely seen people who are like, there's a little school trauma in there too. And the way that I hear them understand it, I just want to share this for folks listening is like, it's kind of the only way though. So whatever you've been through, whatever horrific experience or trauma that, maybe you look around, you say like, no one else has been through this, or I don't know anybody or one other person. It's our body, it's our life. Like, and the way that I see it in working as a trauma therapist is like, well, we could go and interview 100 other people. We could go and read 1,000 books, but ultimately we're going to have to come back to, and I'm here to support you in coming back to what's happening in your life, what's happening in your body, and how are you interacting with it, right? How can I support you in interacting with that? How can I support you in connecting with something externally or internally that feels supportive or positive? And ultimately, how do you sort of bring back that centrality of, what I would just call your spirit or your soul, and people identify with that in different ways, but how do we recentralize you as a being before anything bad happened? And even if your trauma's prenatal, what about before that? Right? Like what about the moment right? And so I know it's hard for folks, and if there's anyone listening that feels that way, like, oh, I just can't get with the lessons and the schooling and the learning, it's like it's the way though. Right? And I think when we don't look at how we can learn and work with our lives, then we end up looking outside again and again and again. And then we end up having sometimes those disappointing experiences of like, I keep trying to do the thing that everyone says I should do, and it's not working. I'm following the diet that this person said, or I'm doing the moves. And so what I love about the modality you've created is how there's structure. It's not just like whatever, right? There's structure, intentional structure, but that's meant to guide folks to connect with themselves. It's invitations to connect in a somatic, embodied, full body way, joyful way even, and just to move through what maybe is in the way of some of that flow, right? To kind of get more aware. So many of us, it's like, all right, we're going to dance, and we get like a little awkward, and people are like, well, I need a drink first, or I need whatever, right? And it's like, Well,
So
what if you don't? Like, what if you could just feel comfortable? Like most kids, you say like, "Let's dance," and they're like, "Woohoo!" One of my clients recently just sent me a picture of her daughter with all these little cute ponytails dancing, and I was just like, that freedom, And I feel like what you're bringing is like an invitation. I don't even wanna say back to, but an invitation to that type of freedom, right?
yeah.
That type of experience in your body, in your life.
1000%, 1000%. Absolutely. Yeah. You're so right that we get trained out of that uninhibited, freely expressed parts of ourselves. Again, unless there's some really, really early, trauma. But I mean, I've worked with thousands of children, many, many, many kids, and it's rare to find a 3-year old, 4-year old, 5-year old in that range, like pre, grade school, right? Where we are often, not all schools, but, the traditional education system in the Western world, we need kids to sit still. We need them to stop talking. We need them to pay attention. So we're often told, be quiet, don't talk. You're going to get in trouble. Stop wiggling, stop daydreaming. We're going to now pour into your brain, right? All the information we think you should know. And now granted, I my hat goes off to teachers and to the education system. Like I'm not here to bash anything. And yet, having now worked with literally thousands of adults as well as all ages, what I notice, right, is these kids, these little ones, I don't have to tell them to be free. I don't have to tell them to make noise, to breathe, to sing. They haven't yet learned that there's any actual formal dancing. They're just moving their body rhythmically, naturally to the music. They're letting their body just there's a natural like impetus that occurs. And they just move and there's no right or they use all the space. They're like bouncing off the walls, right? They roll around, they become an animal, like, it's amazing, right? And it is so natural, and some people might go, "Well, yeah, but that's chaos," and I don't I don't see chaos. I mean, when I do teach kids, I do give them some basic agreements so that they're not, like, hurting each other, right, or hurting the environment around them. So there is a little bit of a framework, but otherwise, it's really just fun. And so with adults, it very much is this. We're going to tap into this part of us that still lives in here and it's right there. Like what I find is all adults need is just a little bit of permission and some invitation to be non-judgmental with themselves and others, that all movement levels and ways are accepted, which is another agreement that we have in transcendence, which means we'll have transcendancers in bed, in a wheelchair, lying on a couch, like it doesn't matter, healing from surgery, healing from an injury, dealing with the diagnosis, right? Because it's not about being a fully bodied, able, non sick person at a wedding who's going to dance. No, it's about literally our bodies crave motion, movement, breath. And music has been a cathartic transformational tool in medicine forever, since the beginning of time, And so when we set up these agreements and we just allow people to really just tap into this inner uninhibited mover, call it, you don't even have to say the word dance. I know the word dance can be, like intimidating, for some people. For quite a few people, you'd be surprised. Or they've had a traumatic experience. See, speaking of trauma, I can't tell you how many coaching clients had some sort of a traumatic experience around their body and around their body moving and being told one thing or another, and they put it in the closet or they just put it in the drawer. Okay, it's not safe. Until later in life when they hit a point where they say, I feel sort of numb or kind of flatlined, and not all of them know that I have this conscious dance modality as this like magic tool in my back pocket, but somehow magically they found their way to the work, right? And all of a sudden they find out that conscious dance is one of the ways I help beautiful souls release the trauma, release the limiting beliefs that they have, the judgment, the constriction, the restriction, and just begin to, it's like turning the light switch back on to that playful, joyful, free, uninhibited, fully creatively expressed being. And it doesn't happen overnight. I mean, I have seen pretty miraculous transformations in like one session, but a lot of these patterns get installed slowly over time, so you want to give yourself, especially if you're very new, just one permission for just like one more degree of expression or fun. And I mean, I've had lots of people just like burst out into joyful tears, like, oh my gosh, I forgot. Like, this has been available to me all this time, like, "Oh my god," like, "I want more of this." It's addicting, like, it's very, because you get these natural waves of positive hormones, like the love hormone and all these beautiful oxytocin, and all of this just gets unlocked when you just move your body rhythmically to music. It's so healing, it's so powerful.
Or even when you just let it move, like, I was just thinking about you shared something, it was probably on social media or somewhere, where you just, like, did a little twirl around the middle of somewhere beautiful recently? Yeah. Where was that?
That was in Madrid, actually, at the Crystal Cathedral Museum.
So that just came to my mind because I was thinking of someone else, that I've known from traveling was in, Italy and Rome, and going into, one of the really expansive spaces and shared a picture, and it's a place I've been a number of times and I love, and it's like, I why don't we as adults, like, let ourselves take a spin in those places? Like, I just paired those 2 in my brain while you were talking, like, I wanna go spin around in that space and look through the hole in the roof and, like, and not care that there's, however many tourists or people around looking at the architecture, like, I wanna be in the space and feel the space in my body in that way, and I just think, like, what if that were normal? Like, what if we went into beautiful spaces and just, like, let ourselves move with them? And, not like doesn't have to be organized flash mob, like, 'cause that's really cool, and we all love that. We all love that. We're like, "Ooh, I got a flash mob," but what if we just gave ourselves permission to, like, single-handedly flash mob every once in a while and just, like, let that energy move, because that's how it feels to me as I'm thinking about it. It feels like there's this, like, inspiration and energy that if I were 2 or 5, I probably would just start without even a question or a doubt or any judgment, would probably just start twirling around and people would be like, "How cute," right? But then you're like 27 or 37 or 45 and people are like, "Why is she twirling around in the middle?" Maybe they are, or maybe we just think they are. Maybe, I think most people are probably inspired by it. Most people are like, "That's beautiful," but somehow we get this message that we shouldn't or we can't.
Yeah. Well, so interestingly, people didn't even care. Like, they were like, "Oh, okay." And like, I think and sometimes, people do care, and they might say something, but I would say this is probably one of the biggest gifts that conscious dance has given me. Is such a strong connection to my creative inner spark of expression, and to be around others and not really care about what they're doing or how they're seeing me, like completely remove the opinion or the judgment of others from my awareness. Not completely, but it's not that I'm not aware that somebody might be watching or judging, or this isn't common, but it's I've neutralized that. It doesn't it's not a part of my decision making process unless I think it's going to be unsafe, like for my physical safety, then I might not obviously do it. But like, if we're like, for example, another interesting Spain story, I was there with my daughter, and like, I don't know about you, but if there's live drumming in the park, it's like honey to, you know what I mean? Like a bee to honey, like I can't not like go. I just have to go. And even if it's for just a minute, like I have all these little videos of me, for street, there's something about live music that just lights up every cell in my body. And even if I just move for a little bit, I mean, even in the grocery store, like my kids are appalled. They're like, "Mom, can you just this time please not dance down the grocery aisle?" And I'm like, "You guys can be embarrassed, but you'll thank me when you're older." Like I'm gonna dance if I feel it. I'm not gonna do it to just do it as an attention seeking thing or just do it to any random song. It's all about when the spirit sparks, when that energy, and I'm also aware of my surroundings, right? But I think it's this cultivating this inner confidence, this inner trust, and this just willingness to be. I think part of it is a willingness to be uncomfortable in the interest of growth. You know, for me, I very much have felt the call to be a positive embodiment of joy expressed. And so if spirit calls me to move, unless I'm feeling unsafe for some reason, I'm gonna say, "What? Here? Now? Okay." Okay. Actually, it's gonna feel really good, and I can close my eyes and not, like, worry if somebody's watching, but, yeah, it's a really amazing experience, and what I will say is that has so it's one thing to just, like, be free to dance down the aisle in the grocery store. It's another thing when my body's symptomizing and the doctors are telling me something and I know in my body wisdom they're wrong. And having the strength, trusting my inner wisdom to say, "You know what? You're wrong." And they're like, "No, no, 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 I'm not wrong." And I'm going to say, "Actually, you are." And I'm going to ask to speak to XYZ to affirm. A good example is my knee. So, long story short, I tore my ACL, didn't realize I had a torn ACL, went 10 years without an ACL, not knowing. Went back to the professional dance world and got invited to perform at 40 after a decade of not having an ACL, not like literally dancing on it, hiking on it. Like I just didn't know I have really strong legs, I guess. So, anyway, so there came a point where it wasn't painful. I felt the wobble. I was like, oh, that's not normal. Anyways, long story short, I had an MRI. My original orthopedic doctor didn't even see that it was missing. Like, just what? You know what I mean? Like right over his head. But I knew, like I knew something wasn't right and I wasn't going to take his what the science, the intellectual, whatever his science, because it wasn't, I mean, I had other doctors read that exact MRI and properly diagnose me. It took a couple years actually of just digging and unpacking and finding the right solution. I'd moved in the process to another country. Anyways, long story short, I ended up getting properly diagnosed. And then they were laying out the options, right? So there's these different surgeries and different tendons that can be used. And I'm so grateful for all this training because I created my perfect healing pathway that did include surgery. It included a very specific tendon that I chose, because my body was guiding me that that was the tendon and how the physician, the doctor, I chose my surgeon. I didn't just take the first one that was handed to me, and then I created this whole protocol, healing protocol, that it not only included the science of like physical therapy, but energy medicine healing. I had Reiki and I did yoga, and I was told I couldn't dance for a year, but I could still do transcendence. I could still do movement that was safe for my body and my knee as I was recovering. And I know all of that led to not only a full recovery, but I mean, I can do everything that I did before and wanted to do. And, I'm aware that I'm 47 and, this knee has a life that I would really love to be 100 years old and still have my knees, so I don't do crazy things because I also don't feel guided to do those things. But that inner wisdom and really having processes, modalities, whether it be meditation, whether it be trauma informed yoga that takes you inward, or conscious dance that gives you music and gives you a space where you let your shoulder move you, where you let your hips unwind and unravel and twist and like just release whatever got stored in there unconsciously. Like all of the hours and hours of conscious movement where I'm really just being with my body. Like when do we just be with our body and listen to the body's wisdom? Like that's the practice. It's been one of my greatest spiritual teachers, intellectual teachers, like across the board, no question.
And one of the things I'll talk about a lot in trauma-informed yoga is it's much more common to do top-down stuff in yoga, like place your hands here and place your like you were saying, there's that outward postural, almost performative element sometimes, right? Of like, get your body into this position. And it's so healing to and I think a lot of yoga starts with that so that then we can go, "Oh, now that I'm a little more here in my body, I can listen," right? I feel a little more, I've attuned to it, and now I can kinda go bottom up and go, "Oh, my body wants this, my body wants that." But there's so much yoga that's out there, but some yoga does probably never gets there to listening to the inside, even though it's yoga. But there's so much potential for that in a yoga practice. There's so much potential for that in dance, but dance can also get stuck at that, I mean, in my mind, more superficial level of just what does it look like on the outside rather than I think what people are so moved by in performers is when you see it coming up and out from within. And yes, there's training and yes, there's technique and there's all these hours of practice and, different types of dance have different,
Elements. Yeah.
elements, different rules, different, some are probably more structured or feel like they set that energy free. Some teachers, some choreographers, I'm sure, right? But to be able to see that like soul on fire coming through a body or a set of bodies on stage, I think that's when there's this intangible element that even in the performative sense that people gravitate towards.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. So, so, so true. It's what I fell in love with that led me to want to be a trained, professional dancer. And then as I began to really dive deeper into conscious dance, I for about a decade married the two worlds, right? So I would take my training, as a professional dancer, but then add this element of intuitive performance or spiritual transformance. And I was invited and continue to do some of that. But there was a real decade where it was like spirit led, a lot of opportunity to be on stage and just let spirit move through me in a performance manner for like a personal development conference or a spiritual, church service and dance ministry for quite some time. One of my favorite stories of actually what led me to marry personal development, transformational coaching, and conscious dance together was your story of like watching somebody on stage reminded me of this moment. And I have a friend who's a professional singer, and she sings all over the world. And she, over the years, would invite me to come and move to her music. And she was invited here in LA. This was right after I quit my corporate sales job, so I couldn't figure out for quite a while how to make a living doing what this conscious dance thing was. Like it had been so transformative for me. And I had people wanting me to teach them, but like just single dance classes, teach a lot of single dance classes to make any kind of money. So it took a while. I struggled to figure out how to be in the business world and, be a thriving entrepreneur. So sales for many, many years was what put regular food on the table for our family. My husband's also in the arts, and that's a whole nother story. But anyhow, so really at this interesting moment where I was, had just quit my sales job, I'd gone on this retreat with my mom, who's a spiritual teacher and thought leader, and spirit got a hold of me. It was in Sedona. And I would just had this spiritual awakening, and I heard God say, "Stop playing small. You know why you're here. You know what you love." And the message was put in your 30-day notice on Monday. And I had like no business plan. I mean, like no idea how I was going to do it, but I was doing my work, but it was like weekends and it was like, sprinkled here and sprinkled there. And so I said yes. And I declared that I was going to go for my dream. And I had this like really spiritual, transcendental, like experience around that. I went home, I put in my 30-day notice. So about a year later from that moment, I get this call from my friend, come do your dance thing to my music for this entrepreneurial women's conference that I'm going to be performing at. And I was like, sure. So we went, and it was this full weekend just for women, like business owners, entrepreneurs who have like online businesses. And she had me come up and just move to a couple of her songs. And then 2 days later, the leader of the conference, like the woman who was teaching, all about how to be an online entrepreneur and successful, she was like, "Okay." So I was watching the video of me speaking, and I literally I and you would never know. That's the other thing, right? Because she's super successful. She's got this thriving business. She's leading this whole conference. She's a very powerful speaker, like you would never know. And she said, I feel awkward in my body. I feel stiff. I feel super judgmental and self conscious. I literally feel like I have two dead chickens hanging from my shoulders. Like,
Oh,
I know, those were her
ouch.
words. Ouch, exactly. And she said, and then in this video, I see you get on stage and you're so graceful, you're embodied, you're so confident, you're just like you just float on stage. And she's like, I got to have some of that. Like, I want that. Mostly, I want to feel that way. I want to feel that way in my body. And I know it's going to make a measurable difference in my speaking, which then in turn will make a measurable difference in my business. And long story short, she asked me to craft a 12-month VIP package for her, like more money than like five figures. I was like, what? You know, and I did. And she was my first, VIP client. And I kind of just put it all together the best I knew how. And she literally evoked from me. She helped me birth, how I do what I do today.
That is so beautiful, and I didn't know that, and I know I can just picture you on stage, it's like butter, and she's like, "I want that. I want that," like, that freedom, right? And it is, it's like an embodied expression of creativity and freedom and flow. That's so beautiful, and so that's where is that where the structure for Transcendence came from?
Transcendence came just through teaching individuals and workshops of the movement modality. The 10 stages of transcendence got born just over working with the seniors and the kids. And after my daughter was born, I actually moved home to my mom where I grew up. My mom had a spiritual center. So I launched a arts ministry at the church during those 4 years. And that's where I had my own healing through mind body movement. And I began to launch, transcendence as a modality. And then it just continued from there. And I continued to teach and continue to lead workshops, but really how to take it and really help an individual see a massive transformation came from this first, client. And then I was able to take that and launch a larger business with it. But Nancy, I mean, the cool thing about Nancy was within about 6 weeks, like we had a few sessions. She came to the house, we did a VIP day, and then her next speaking engagement, she called me afterwards and she said, Jennifer, we did it. Like I felt graceful, I felt confident, I felt connected to my arms, and as my heart was my hands are an expression of my heart. Like, and if you watch the video, it's not like you see a massive change. It was much more of an internal, like self-image and relationship to her body that had changed and transformed. It's an inside out process. And then yes, eventually, the more you are with your body, the more you move the body, the more you inhabit your body. Like energy's allowed to flow through all aspects of your body. And of course that continued along the way. But so yeah, so transcendence was certainly one of the major ingredients that was used, and it was also where I learned that yes, the full 60-minute practice is. I mean, we did that during her VIP day, and she saw amazing breakthroughs during that. But where the real magic was is she was so busy as a single mom entrepreneur. She was like, I can't be doing this. Like, it can't be hours and hours and hours, Jennifer. You've got to get like put it into like a bite-sized piece for me. So I was able to take these 10 stages of transcendence and actually isolate pieces of them and go, oh, so like the body part dance, the dance of self, where you let the different parts of the body move you in 5 minutes, like boom, just that. I use that not every day, but almost every single day. In like after this interview, I'm going to get up and I'm going to do a little bit of like conscious movement where is, like the body just needs to unwind where the tension is sitting, and just release itself. And it just needs permission to do it. It knows what to do. It's just often we drag the body from point A to point B.
We really drag it around. One of, my students, a longtime student, often refers to our bodies as like a meat suit when we're thinking of it that way, right? You're like, "Drag my meat suit all around," like, that, there's life, and she does it in sort of a funny way. But that's the image that comes to me is like, we're just dragging this meat suit from here to there rather than, like, living all this energy and expressing all this creativity through this gift of a body that we have, right? Shout out shout out to Tara. I think it's hilarious when you say meat suit. She's like, "We're these beautiful spiritual beings, and we've got this meat suit." But I wanted to say something else that stands out to me in what you were describing is you mentioned safety a number of times, right? And like if I feel safe enough or people don't feel safe in front of others or there's this fear of judgment and all those things. And I just think about so many things that have happened in the world or Denise Duffield Thomas, who's coming on the podcast, was saying like it's a very newsy time. It's a very newsy time. There's a lot of like things we hear about that create fear or reactions of fear or tension in us. And even in a supermarket or anywhere you are, like people, I think in the States in particular are, like probably not feeling as safe as they have at other points in time. But when I think of you walking down the supermarket aisle and maybe it's a song you like that comes on the radio or whatever, just dancing, that makes me feel safer than hands on the cart, gripping, looking straight forward, ignoring people, right? Like that freedom and that embodiment actually makes me feel safer in an environment. So I feel like when we do this for ourselves, we're also sharing it with other people, right? And I remember when I lived in Italy, I used to go running and people would look at me like, what is she running from? Because I would just go running through town and like there was a little park in the corner of Bologna where people would go running, jogging. But, like, it wasn't really a thing, but it felt so enlivening for me to just do what my body wanted to do, like, regardless of culture, and I kind of liked that, like, "Oh, people are like, what's happening here?" It kinda stirs things up for a moment, and I feel like that freedom you don't have to, like, just go sprinting through the supermarket necessarily, but that freedom to it puts us at ease. Like you've said, Carrie O'Worko, who's coming on the podcast, has also said, this has been in our bones for centuries, like dance and song. And when we allow that back in an everyday way, I feel like that, I mean, it's therapeutic, it's healing, it's natural, it's growth oriented. It puts us at ease, I think, at a deep level. And it feels really necessary to me. And one of the things I do, because I can really get up in my head, especially if like pandemic times and you're just in your house, I just will start playing music when I'm doing whatever. I'm brushing my teeth or I'm in a little moment between something. I'll put it on random and I'll just not think about it, but dance to whatever's on and skip around to whatever feels inspiring in the moment. And that music and dance that's just like coming from my phone, maybe, like even that feels like it just breaks up. It breaks up. And like you said, it lets any of the tension that has settled in start to move and process. And so we can not get stuck in that. We can stay connected to more of a sense of creativity and inspiration.
Absolutely. I love that. It's such a great reminder that it doesn't have to take a lot. And I think one of the safest places, and I think if you think about, okay, so where am I going to feel safe to do this? I will say this. I will say this. There are quite a few clients that I work with that it requires them closing the door and closing the blinds. and being invited into a safe container where they can just remember, and they can begin to tap in to that part of them that is free, which is why, having programs or resources available like your books and your classes or the classes that I offer give people a safe place to come and begin to just taste and be held in that safe environment. And then the little cocoon that's this little, like, womb to birth into this new, more free version of you. You can kind of start to spread your wings. I see it happen. And then they might let the door open and they might let their spouse see them move. I mean, just that can be really, really scary, but then they go, oh, I can this is okay, and then they let their kids in maybe, and then all of a sudden now the kids are wanting to move and dance with them, and now their circle of safety is a little bit bigger, right? And then it just gets a little bigger and a little bigger and a little bigger until all of a sudden, like you could be at the grocery store or the farmer's market or in Italy, or wherever, and just know that you're safe in your own skin. And that for me, I'll just speak my own spiritual words. It's the power breathing me is going to guide me. So if, like, I just trust that inner guidance, you and I live from that point of power from within, that inner resonance, with that higher power. But it's, it takes time. Like, I didn't step onto the conscious dance floor the first time and immediately feel safe. I had been really judged in dance. I had been sized up. I had been graded like a letter grade in college from my ballet class. Like, what? And I'm like underweight and I got a C on my report card, which just blows my mind to this day. Like, what kind of a message does that send a 17-year-old? Like, what? And so it took time. It took time to feel that I'm enough. It took time to let my body be all these different sizes and shapes and be loved, and to be visually in front of others at all these different sizes and shapes and not be like, at what's the word I'm looking for? Like like my guard is up, right? Like I'm going to get ridiculed or I'm going to get judged, and it really, just to say this because it's important, that fear that lives within us goes back to tribal times. Like, if we were judged and not in line with the tribe and got ostracized or rejected from the tribe, we would die. You couldn't survive without the tribe. So that's why today we have this deep desire to, like, be seen and acknowledged and accepted and not stand out too much and not be too this or that and to, like, fall in line, because it literally triggers our survival mechanism, right? And so once you just begin to work with yourself and go, no, 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 I'm safe. No, actually, I can tap into an inner source of love and acceptance that is not required on society acceptance or anyone outside of me's love and acceptance. All of a sudden, it's like you cut all the tethers. And it isn't that I don't care if you like me, or like, that your audience receives this well. I mean, we all want to be liked and loved. We all want to have a group of friends. That's just an innate human desire. And what I know, though, is when I'm living from my authentic truth, you know, and loving me for who I really am, then now I'm attracting the right people, the right community, and the right opportunities and places that are in alignment with that. And there are places I don't go and circles that I don't frequent because it's just like a different language, like it's just a different frequency. I don't make them wrong. I'm not judging them. It's just there just isn't resonance there, right?
Well, and if you don't feel like I don't know if it's like you don't feel like you can allow that energy to flow there, but if it doesn't feel safe enough or like a fit or like, then yeah, there's plenty of circles to run in. There's so many options in this life. Like, we choose the ones that are best for us, right? And we choose the ones, and I think when you have that sense of connection to your body, it's like a quicker signal that you pick up. Like you can open a door and be like, nope.
Oh, I'm so glad you said that. Yes. Well, so that tees up really perfectly one of the things I wanted to say in regards to the meat suit, right? One of my favorite authors of and godmothers of conscious dance is Gabrielle Roth. And in her book, which was one of my first books on this subject, is called Maps to Ecstasy. She's the creator of Five Rhythms. And she talks about this meat suit being this magical suit. Right? So if you think right? Because the body and mind and soul are perfectly wired. So if you think about getting chills, if you think about your heart racing, if you think about that gut feeling, if you think about the hair standing up on your back, like our bodies are literally transmitting. It's not a dead meat suit. And I'm not to like, I get the funny, like, you know what I mean? Like explanation of a meat suit. But like in my experience, once you turn on all the lights, like it is loud. You know what I mean? Like somebody will walk by and go, "Ooh, yeah, maybe not," or "Ooh, great vibe, good energy there." Like you just can sense and feel and know. It helps you in decision making. It just helps you in every way when everything's turned on and you can feel it and sense it, right?
And I know Tara would 100% agree, who's the person who uses the meat suit charm. And I think she uses it in the magical way too. I don't wanna spin it the wrong way, Tara.
No, no, it's all good.
Please correct me in all the comments, Tara, if I've misrepresented you in any way. I just love it when she says meat suit because it's kind of funny.
Well, and I'm sure it's a joke, right? It's like we yeah, absolutely.
It's sort of just a perspective shift in the moment because 'cause you're like, "Oh, wait, what?" Right? Because sometimes we over-identify with our bodies too, or sometimes we forget about the magic of the energy that's running through, or yeah, so it's fun. So I know we're coming close to time, and I'm curious what you would say to someone who right now is just, I think a lot of people are struggling in different ways, kind of communally, globally. There's a lot of trauma processing, there's a lot of healing happening. Like, what would you say to someone who's just having a rough day, having a hard time?
Yeah. The first thing I would recommend, honestly, is a news fast, right? I often won't know about some of the tragedies right away because I just don't feel guided to spend a lot of time watching the news. So I would just look at how much news are you seeing on television and or on your device and just give that a pause. Because if something really happens that like you need to know, you will find out. Like you're going to know. You know, you can trust that you will know. And that in and of itself in my life has transformed. Like I don't feel so triggered in my nervous system by watching that all the time, number 1, right? And then if we're not then ingesting the news, right, then I would put you on a love diet. Like, what do you love? Do you love music? Do you love animals? Do you love art? Do you love nature? And I would just be feeding you, even if it's just 5, 10 minutes a day, a diet of really giving yourself permission to do, think, be in connection to what lights you up and what you love.
I absolutely love that. And I love, like, the love diet, like, feeding yourself or like, nurturing yourself with exactly what it is you love, and yeah, I mean, I've definitely pruned a lot of my devices so that I don't see a lot of news, being a trauma therapist in particular, like, I'm like, "I've heard enough stories. I hear enough stories. I don't need any more stories. I don't need any more newsy stories." But I do need positive stories, and so I try to prune my devices to show me, like, good news movement or watch something funny if I'm gonna watch something, or either interesting, educational, or funny and lighthearted. So I feel like being really conscious about what we're ingesting in our minds and bodies and souls is so powerful, and we can forget about that. We can kinda get swept up in what we think is just what everybody's doing or what we should be doing or what's habit. But we can turn off that news and silence it and reduce the images coming in and look around at the trees instead, look at beautiful art. There's so many options.
Yeah. And I love that you talked about positive news and laughter, something funny, like you've intentionally brought that into your life. It takes intention, it takes setting an intention and then actually systematizing it. It sounds like you've put things on your device so that they're easy to get to and access. I love that. It's so important. It's so, so important. Yeah.
And I think we can really use technology in that way. I even have a chat with a couple of friends where I'll have a silly thought and I'll just start sharing it with them and I will bust myself up. I'll just be like, "You guys, you can't even," like, I can't even get the words out because 'cause I'm laughing at myself so much, and they're like, "Lisa, what are you even," and, they get a funny message later in the day, so
So yeah, definitely humor is, I mean, they've done all sorts of studies on laughter, and there's laughter yoga now, right? And all this great stuff. The other thing I would say, just bringing it back as a final, tip around music, you mentioned, on your device, just putting it on random. What's required for that is having a playlist. So I use Shazam, and I have certain like radio stations that just like every song almost I'm like Shazam, 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 and then I create playlists for myself that are just as soon as that song comes on. We all know that song that comes on that almost makes you cry when you hear it, or that makes you laugh because you think about, like when you were 12, or that song that was played at a wedding, or, music bypasses the intellect and goes straight into the emotional centers of the brain, and the body immediately responds. It doesn't even have a chance to think, right? There's an emotional, biological response. So, using music as medicine is such an easy, fast, simple way to shift your mood. And then you add a little movement to it. It's like you sprinkle in that sparkly magic energy. And what's a good example of this? Speaking of funny, like, raising kids is not easy. My 3 are now a little older. I have a 22-year-old, 18-year-old, and 16-year-old. But when they were little, if I'd get like really frustrated or irritated at them because they weren't doing something or they had done something, two things. My middle son would go, "Mom, mom." And he'd like model my deep breath, right? And I'm like, just want to slap you. But I would breathe with him and it'd be like, okay, all right, you got me, you got me. Or they would say, "Mom, you need to dance. Mom, you need to dance." And I'd be like, you're right. I do. I do. Let's just turn on some music. And we would just literally do the dance of release and shake like a rag doll or like a dog shaking off water. And I would feel like all that tension, anger, stress, frustration just fell to the earth. And then here's why that matters, because when I'm in stress, right, and when the cortisol is in my system, and when I'm in my sympathetic nervous system, my ability to tap into really the best positive action or solution is super inhibited. But if I can have a moment where I can literally shake that off and shift my energy and move into expansive, first of all, my hormones are helping. The breath is helping, which literally opens up my creative mind. Now I'm not in fight or flight mode, right? I'm in parasympathetic, which is rest, digest, create. Now I can literally create a more empowered action step, solution, whatever it is. So really an extremely powerful tool for sure.
I love watching animals do this, and I watch my dogs all the time, how they shake it off. They'll get on a scent and get really intense, and we'll go this way, and then shake, 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 and then they'll come. It's this transition that happens, I mean, I don't even know how many times a day, it's like hundreds. And you think of how often do we let ourselves just kind of shake something off? I mean, I do it, and especially when I'm in the office in between each session, like I go drink water, I shake my body, I sometimes spray stuff in the air, I move, like, and that feels so, even if I'm moving with a client, it still feels like I need to do that in between just for me, right? For my body, my system. But it's sometimes just a little bit, right? Like you said, you play a song in that moment where you're stressed with your kids, and then they start dancing, and then you see that innocence and joy and freedom, and then you tap into your own, and at least it's a little bit better, right? At least it's not going in that cycle of just more and more tension and disconnection. It's a moment of connection, right? And I think that kind of state in our nervous system is like where we really thrive, because like you said earlier, we've evolved to be connected to each other, to be connected to a group. And so I love that image of you just with your younger kids dancing around, shaking it off, like, okay, we're moving forward. We're moving through that. We literally just moved through that. Yes.
Now go clean your room.
Yeah. Exactly. Now it's time to clean. So last question for you. What brings you hope?
What brings me hope? Oh, to your point around the positive news, like there's so much good. There really is. I mean, the news has tapped into that fear, like amygdala, and they're feeding us a lot of fear, right? Because people are curious. It sells, right? However, there's I think way more good in the world happening, and we just maybe aren't hearing about it than there is anything negative. Truly, I believe that. And that's what gives me hope, is I can sense it, I can feel it, knowing people like you and collaborating and coming together and having these conversations gives me hope. My clients give me hope, seeing their breakthroughs, watching the new generations come, the innovations that are happening. Like I believe that we will turn this whole climate thing around. There's no question that we are fully equipped with everything required to see this whole world, species, human nature evolve. And I'm just really grateful to serve as even the smallest, ray of hope and sunshine and light and joy in this beautiful journey called life.
I love it. And I'm so grateful to know you and to be a part of all of the joy that you spread. I love that Joy is your middle name because you really embody it. And I think you know that. And it's just such a part of how I receive you and who I feel you to be. So thank you for bringing that here today. I know at some point you might have some big things coming up in that you'll share with us. So maybe you'll come back on the podcast. But is there anything right now you want to share? Your website? How can people connect with you and keep up with your work?
Absolutely. So I teach a all worldwide, everybody invited to the dance party, all ages, mobility levels, a Transcendance class. I do that the first Saturday of every month at 10 a.m. Pacific and the second Wednesday evening of every month around 5 p.m. Pacific. So the next class is the first Saturday in August. Now I know this recording will be available beyond that, but you can always go to just bti.com/dance. So the name of our institute is Brave Thinking Institute. So that's the acronym for Brave Thinking Institute, bti.com/dance. And if you catch this, I will give you my coupon code in case they catch it and they want to come to one of those August classes. It's Freedom 22. Freedom.
Freedom
Freedom
22.
22 for next month. Yes, Freedom
Okay.
22. Yeah.
We've got it. All right. So the coupon code is Freedom22, and we'll put that in the show notes for everyone. Thank you, Jennifer, for being here and for being who you are and for letting all that is flow through your body and mind and spirit and work. I just love having you here. So grateful to be connected with you. And thanks for sharing. Thanks for sharing your love and your joy with us.
Oh, thank you. Such a pleasure. My pleasure. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much for listening. My hope is that you walk away from these episodes feeling supported and like you have a place to come to find the hope and inspiration you need to take your next small step forward. For more information and resources, please visit howwecanheal.com. There, you'll find tons of helpful resources and the full transcript of each show. Thanks so much for your messages, feedback, and ideas about the podcast. I love hearing from you, and I so appreciate your support. There are lots of ways you can support the show, and I'm grateful for every little bit of love you share. If you love the show, please leave us a review on Apple, Spotify, Audible, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also subscribe on YouTube to get updates every week. You can always visit howwecanheal.com/podcast to share your thoughts and ideas. I love hearing from you, so keep your comments coming. If you'd like to stay connected in between episodes, you can also text me. Text the word HEAL to 888-858-0811. That's 888-858-0811. I went for the number with a lot of eights in it. I'll send you some inspiration and support a few times a month, and you can text me back there too. Before we wrap up, I want to be clear that this podcast isn't offering any prescriptions. It's not advice or any kind of diagnosis. Your decisions are in your hands, and we encourage you to consult with any relevant healthcare professionals you may need to support you through your unique path of healing. I'd also like to send thanks to our guests today, to Christine O'Donnell and Celine Baumgartner of Bright-Sided Podcasting, and to everyone who helped support this podcast directly and indirectly. Alex, thanks for taking the dogs out while I record. Lastly, I'd love to give a shout out to my big brother, Matt, who passed away in 2002. He wrote this music, and it makes my heart so happy to share it with you now.